The legacy of slavery serves as a haunting reminder of humanity's capacity for cruelty and oppression. Slavery in America had deep roots, dating back to the colonial era and persisting through the antebellum period. Enslaved Africans and their descendants endured forced labor, physical punishment, and various forms of degradation. The term antebellum originates from Latin, where ante means before and bellum means war. In the context of American history, the antebellum era refers to the period leading up to the American Civil War, specifically spanning from the late 18th century, after the War of 1812, to the outbreak of the Civil War in 1861. This period is crucial in understanding the social, economic, and political factors that culminated in the Civil War. The antebellum South was characterized by slavery and the culture it fostered. Over time, Southern intellectuals and leaders shifted from viewing slavery as an embarrassing, temporary system to defending it as a positive institution. This shift brought them into conflict with the emerging abolitionist movement. The demand for slave labor, coupled with the U.S. ban on importing more slaves from Africa, led to rising prices for slaves. Smaller farms in settled areas like Virginia found it profitable to sell their slaves further south and west. While most Southern farmers had small to medium-sized farms with few slaves, plantation owners with large numbers of slaves held considerable prestige and political power. During the antebellum era, the nation grappled with contentious issues, such as states' rights, the expansion of slavery into new territories, and the growing tensions between the North and the South. These factors ultimately contributed to the outbreak of the Civil War, leaving a profound and lasting impact on the nation. However, beyond the well-documented dehumanization and mistreatment of slaves, a lesser-known aspect is the abuse experienced by black male slaves at the hands of elite white women. These women, part of the planter class, were associated with wealthy plantation owners who relied heavily on slave labor. This hidden history sheds light on the exploitation faced by black male slaves and the power dynamics that facilitated it. White women in the antebellum South held considerable power within the context of slavery. While they were subject to societal expectations of femininity, they actively participated in maintaining and perpetuating the institution. They could issue commands, give instructions, and enforce discipline within their homes and on plantations. Historian Stephanie Jones Rogers argues that white women were far from passive bystanders in the business of slavery. She draws on interviews with formerly enslaved people conducted during the Great Depression to show that white girls were trained in slave ownership and discipline from a young age. Some even received enslaved people as gifts when they were as young as 9 months old. One of the most distressing aspects of the abuse endured by black male slaves was sexual exploitation by elite white women. Despite the dominant narrative portraying white women as passive, some actively engaged in non-consensual sexual relationships and rape, exploiting their power and control over black male slaves. This perpetuated a cycle of sexual violence and degradation. Sexual exploitation of slaves by white women was a means of compensating for their lack of power in other aspects of their lives. While these women were considered property themselves, they used sex as an instrument of power, reinforcing both white supremacy and patriarchy. Physical abuse was another grim reality for black male slaves in the antebellum South. Slavery existed in various forms, with slaves living and working in diverse environments. Regardless of the setting, the underlying concept remained the same: Slaves were considered property and were subjected to violence, either actual or threatened. Some instances of physical abuse by white women included whipping, beating, and other forms of corporal punishment. These acts left lasting physical and psychological scars on the enslaved individuals. The extent of physical abuse sometimes reached horrifying levels, as evidenced by the notorious case of Madame Marie Delphine Lalaurie. Madame Lalaurie, a wealthy New Orleans resident, subjected her slaves to unimaginable cruelty. Reports of her mistreatment of slaves had become widespread, leading to an investigation. The discovery of a torture chamber in her mansion shocked the community, revealing the depths of her sadistic behavior. This gruesome episode served as a stark example of the horrors endured by black male slaves. In conclusion, uncovering the hidden histories of slavery in the antebellum South reveals the disturbing dimensions of this institution. From the exploitation of black male slaves by white women to the physical abuse suffered by the enslaved, these dark aspects of history challenge conventional narratives and deepen our understanding of power dynamics during that era. Acknowledging these historical injustices is crucial for promoting a more inclusive and equitable future.